Welcome to another Top Grades Made Easy video. We're looking at paper 1, the reading questions, and what I'm going to tell you should relax you. Number 1, do not change anything if it is working. So if your teachers have taught you methods which are working for you, don't take my advice unless you think, yes, Mr. Salles knows what he's doing, I'm going to give it a go. Don't do anything to change stuff that's working well. The main thing I'm going to tell you is my method. Points make prizes. Now, your teachers have probably told you use a different method for every question. I've made loads of videos like that in the past, but now my advice has changed. Why? Because I've read hundreds of exam answers marked by senior examiners, and they don't conform to the methods which so many teachers teach. They conform to one method. Points make prizes. You're going to want to stick around to see what that means. And the next thing I'm going to do is ask you to consider changing the timings. Do not change the timings and order of your exam if it's already working for you. But if it's not working, this video is going to pay you big time. So points make prizes is my way of helping you remember it's the number of explanations that gives you your mark. What is an explanation? Well, an explanation is anything that could start with this suggests. I'm going to show you it with this suggests now. You don't have to use that phrase, but anything that means this suggests and then the explanation that follows it is going to get you 1 mark. So let's imagine there's this bit of writing in my source. She ate her food ravenously, not pausing between mouthfuls, her expensive makeup ruined by sauce. We just have to come up with an explanation. This suggests she might be starving. 1 mark. This suggests her hunger is more powerful than her pride, because she doesn't mind messing up her makeup. 1 mark. This suggests she fears someone will take her food because she doesn't pause. 1 mark. 3 explanations which give you 3 marks. Now you might think that coming up with 3 explanations for 1 quote marks you out as some special sort of English genius. But that is not why this method works. So you could write, yep, it suggests this, this also suggests this also suggests this, I'm a genius. However, you could simply finish with 1 explanation, then find a different quote and write 1 explanation for that different quote, and so on. So what does that mean? It means that in question 2, which is worth 8 marks, you can find 8 different quotes and find 1 this suggests, 1 explanation for each quote. Or you can find 4 quotes and write 2 this suggests explanations for each of those 4 quotes to get all 8 marks. Doesn't matter which combination you do it in, the examiners don't mind, they just count explanations. Do they literally sit there and count them? No, this is all going on subconsciously in the examiner's head. But that is how you build up marks. When you get to questions 3 and question 4, that method, this suggests, is the same. You could use those same words all the way through and the examiner isn't going to go, oh, I'm so bored, I'm going to give this a low mark. They'll just say, oh no, explanation, I'm counting it. Right, with question 3, you're obviously not writing about language features, you have to write about structure. So this is a Top Grades Made Easy video. What does structure mean in an easy way? It means a change of focus. You can literally use that phrase every single time for all your focuses, except obviously the first. And this brings us on to the next technique, a simple one for questions 3 and 4. Always write about the beginning of the text and the ending of the text. That shows you're answering the whole question, and you will get full marks if you've written enough explanations. There is a top tip here. Some of your this suggests, your explanations under exam pressure might not answer the question. So for question 2, 8 marks, you might say, I'll write 10 explanations to make sure of those full 8 marks. Question 3, same deal. Question 4, 20 marks. Well, that's 20 explanations. The good news is you only need 16 to get a grade 9. In question 4, what will your explanations be about? Well, the good news is the question gives you 2, 3, often 4 opinions. And all you're going to do is explain what you think about all those opinions. Mainly, you're going to agree. And then if you find anything to disagree with, mention it. How are you going to prove it? This suggests, this suggests, this suggests from your quotes. So what was the unifying principle? Points make prizes. The next easy way to get top grades is to ignore the bit on the exam paper which says spend 15 minutes reading this paper. That is dumb advice. Working memory can only cope with 4 bits of information, and you'll get to 4 bits of information that's new within about 30 seconds, and the rest of your 14.5 minutes will be wasted. You won't be able to remember what you've read. Instead, start earning marks straight away by answering a question as quickly as you can. That means you have about 1.5 minutes per mark. That means an 8-mark question will last you 12 minutes. A 20-mark question will last you 30 minutes. Should you spend longer on a question getting to the end of it? Never! Because this exam is not tiered. That means the least academic student needs to be able to get marks. Where do those marks come? Super easy, at the beginning of the question. So never try and get the hard marks at the end of the question by spending too long on it. Go and get the easy marks at the beginning of the next question. And this brings us to the question order. Remember, if the order is working for you, do not change it. However, typically, what I see in schools is that students run out of energy in questions 4 and 5. But those questions are worth 75% of your marks. For me, that is not a good idea. Consequently, I recommend experimenting with doing question 5 first, followed by question 4. Remember, you do not have to do this, and you should only consider it if you're not getting the marks you want on question 5 and question 4. The most popular choice for question 5 is the description question. So if you're not a brilliant descriptive writer, you should consider gaming that question. I'm putting quotation marks because it sounds like cheating, but it's not. Write yourself 2 character descriptions, one of a wonderful character and one of an evil character. Do the same with weather. One super positive description of the weather, one really negative one. Whatever the question is in the exam, you will be able to use at least one of those characters and at least one of those weather descriptions. Probably all of them. Why? Well, the weather descriptions can be a before and after. So they're easy to fit into the scene, and similarly your characters. The advantage of using this pre-planned system is you can plan all the sentence structures, the vocabulary, the punctuation, the techniques, everything you want for a much better grade. And if you memorize it, it will fit. That is my 100% guarantee. You just have to practice adapting it to past questions. Now, you might want to write a story because this isn't just to get through an exam. You actually want to be good at English. Yes, I love you if that's you. How will you game this system? Well, you'll just think of a story that you like and outline the plot. Memorize that plot. How many bits of the plot should you memorise? 5. In a normal story, you get the beginning, then the rising action, then this big crisis, then there's a solution which probably leads to another crisis, and then there's the resolution. You don't want to worry about all of those things. They will come naturally. This is what you want to do. You want to think, where am I going to start? Start with the crisis, the big moral choice, or the big danger, or the big whatever in your story. Put that first. If we need to find out how your characters got there, Shazam! Flashback. What does this give you? Starting with a crisis and a flashback automatically gives you an interesting and novel structure, which automatically gives you top marks. So this is an easy way to game the story question. I tested this myself. I sat the exam, I paid my money, not last November, the one before, and I went in with 2 story plots memorised. They would both fit the question. They literally both fit. I'm planning on one of them always fitting. Sometimes it will be both. Thank you for asking. I scored 100%. Now, what about the biggest question on the exam paper? The biggest question is A06 because it's worth 16 marks on both papers. Therefore, it carries more marks than anything else. But you haven't thought of it that way. But now that you know that, you're thinking, Mr. Salles, give me a top grades easy method to get great marks on the 32 marks that are available across both papers. Luckily, I've got you covered. Start each sentence with a different word. Now that might sound stupid, but it isn't. As soon as you start each sentence with a different word, your brain has to work out, well, how am I going to start this sentence with a different word? Your brain becomes creative. It starts taking noun phrases and subordinate clauses, stuff that you might not even know exists, and it starts moving them about in the sentence automatically. That's how brilliant your brain is. And your sentences will become more interesting. But even more importantly, when you move the noun phrases and the subordinate clause, what happens? You have to start using different sorts of punctuation, and you get better marks for the punctuation as well. How will you remember to use the punctuation? I just write that list on the top of my paper, and then when I've used my colon, I tick it off. When I use my semicolon, I tick it off, and so on. By the way, you can still get 100% without a colon and without a semicolon. The reason I say that is most students get them wrong and they still get really great marks. If you've got time before the exam, learn the rules, make sure of getting 100%. If you haven't got time, just have that as a checklist, whack them in. Time for paper 2. Paper 2A, the reading questions. Exactly the same things apply. Points make prizes. The number of explanations you write is equal to the number of marks. If you're not brilliant yet, write a couple more explanations in case some of them don't count. The timings are the same, 1.5 minutes per mark, because you're only going to read the sources. You're not going to read the whole paper first. Which question are you going to start with? Well, you're actually not going to start with question 2 or 4 or 1. You're going to start with question 3 because it is only on one source. Remember, you're only going to follow this advice if you haven't been getting the grades you want. I want to start with just one source because that's a way to get easy grades. I only have to think about one thing. Question 3 is worth 12 marks, 12 explanations with a couple of extra if I've got time. Sorted. Now, question 2 and question 4, I don't want to do first because they invite you to compare both texts. That takes a lot of brain power, so I'm going to leave them later. Which one of those 2 will I do first? Well, obviously I'm going to do the one that is worth more marks. That's question 4, it's worth 16. Now, I have got a juicy method for you. which is going to make the comparison easy. Most teachers probably teach you like this. Write something about source A, compare it to source B, write something new about source A, compare it to source B. That works 100% of the time, but it takes a lot of brain power and it takes time. Much easier to say, right, I'm going to take source A and I'm going to write everything I can about it in my 50% of my time limit. So I've got a 16-mark question, which is worth 1.5 minutes per mark. I'm going to spend 24 minutes on it. The first 12, I'm just going to write about source A. Then the second 12, I'm just going to write about source B. I'm going to leave a little gap between them so that I can write a sentence that links them. So it is similar, blah, 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 but it is also different because blah, 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 blah. Because I might not be a genius, I won't know what the similarities and differences are until I've written all about source B. So that's why I'm going to leave that little gap and fill it in when I've got to the end and worked out what the similarities and differences are. That becomes easy. It's even easier because when I'm writing about source B, the similarities and differences will be obvious because I've only just written about source A. I won't have had time to forget any of it. So writing that sentence about the similarities and differences is going to be so easy. If I forget to leave that gap, no worries, I'll just write those sentences at the end, comparing back. As long as when I'm writing about source B, I talk about how that's similar or different to source A, I'm going to get the grades. Question 2, question 4 are both comparison questions that work exactly like that. Sorted. Can I give you a top grades made easy strategy for the persuasive writing question? Of course I can. So, there is one method that always gets the marks. That is overloading your writing with techniques. All those persuasive techniques you've been taught, I teach 15 of them, your teacher might teach 10, it doesn't matter. Because these are the ones that top grade students use again and again and again. Start with an anecdote, a little story that illustrates your main point. Number 2, rhetorical questions. Actually have a load of them in there. It sounds amateur, but it isn't. It's what the professionals do. Repetition. As many different kinds of repetition as you can think of, whap them in. The Greeks who invented rhetoric had 15 different kinds of repetition. That's how much they loved it. You don't need to know what they are. Just say to yourself, I'm going to do as many kinds of repetition as I can possibly think of. Use emotive language. Either you want to show something is fantastic, it's your idea, use the positive words, or you want to show that something is ridiculous, it's the idea you're fighting against. Use negative emotional words. Happens in every sentence. Do it all the time. Then we have contrast. The more contrasts you put in, the more lively your writing. And obviously triplets. Who doesn't love things listed in threes? 3 blind mice, Goldilocks and the 3 bears, like we're addicted to it from the moment we can hear stories. So that is one way, but there is an easier way. And this is the easier way. Think about the structure of your argument. You're not just chucking these brilliant persuasive techniques. You're actually trying to persuade people through the evidence that you give them. How will you organise that evidence? Well, focus at the beginning on how things will be better in the next year if they take up your brilliant ideas. Every student in the country will be doing that. But only a few will be doing this. They will then be thinking, right, well, if that happens for the next 10 years, what will society be like for you in 10 years' time? If I'm writing about society, my grades go up. If I think about what society will be like in 10 years' time, I will get much better ideas than all the other people in the exam hall. unless they've watched this video. Then, no one's doing this. What will it be like in 30 years' time? That is future society. How will the world change because of this small difference that I'm proposing now? When you get to that level, not only is your brain being much more creative, it's also being much more persuasive, because it's saying this small change is going to lead to these big effects, but actually, when you add the big effects up, it's gonna be massive. This is the world we want. This is the world you want to vote for. Follow me, oh my people. It's going to be easy for you to nail the grade. Even easier, however, is to think, well, I can do quite a lot of that, and I can do quite a lot of that. What happens if I combine them? We're cooking up a top grade, that's what will happen. Right, you will remember the part of the exam that carries most marks. It's squeezed into the bottom of my screen, A06. That meant two things. Starting each sentence with a different word, and having your list of punctuation and checking it off as you use it. A word of caution: with your repetition, you might want to start loads of sentences with the same word. That is allowed. If the repetition is deliberate, it's a technique that's going to lead to you getting higher marks. But if it's not deliberate, ditch it. Start every sentence with a different word. I have written guides to every single question that show you exactly how to use the Point Makes prizes. I've got persuasive writing one. I've got a description and story one. In fact, I've got more than one. I've got courses in the description below if you want to see how you can learn this method in more detail. And if you don't, then you need to watch the next video, which is going to show you what brilliant answers actually look like.